I was reading a great book the other day about the Tibetan saint Milarepa. If you get a chance to read it, it's beautiful. It really helps me to read somebody like Milarepa, because Milarepa killed 35 people. Sometimes I'm criticised because I come from a very violent background, and I was a hugely violent man and was in lots of fights and was insecure and all that. And people think that you go from being a violent man and you start following the path of love or the path of divinity. They feel as though they act as though you're a fake, and that you're just running away from your crimes. Of course, nobody can run away from what they've done. Everyone has to atone for what they've done. But there doesn't seem to be much room for redemption in society. They think that a leopard can't change its spots, but actually, when you look at Milarepa, he became a saint, an enlightened man in one lifetime. If you look at St. Paul was a murderer. He wrote 17 of the books in the New Testament. He used to be Saul of Tarsus. He crucified and tortured Christians before his epiphany on the road to Damascus. People often judge me because I used to be violent, but my story is powerful because I was violent, not despite the fact that I was violent. It's powerful because I'm able to say, I know that doesn't work. I know that that even well-intentioned violence rebounds on you. You look at someone like Mandela. Mandela was a terrorist. He became a prophet. He became a spiritual leader in one lifetime. But he was a terrorist. He did 30 years in jail, and it doesn't matter that he felt he was doing it for the right causes. He was still a terrorist. When he came out of prison in Robben Island after nearly 30 years, in his inaugural speech, he said, "We have to work from a higher power. We can't work from hate anymore. We can't work from that place." What they realised, what Milarepa realised, what Mandela realised, what St. Paul realised, was that when they had their epiphanies, they had moments of clarity. They recognised that everything is scripture. There is lessons everywhere. There isn't anything that you can't learn from. You can go into the woods now and look at trees, and you can get the perfect business model just from examining and inquiring into how a tree works. If you just look at anything in nature, you can get infinite lessons from nature. Pick up the holy books. They are literally, they get a lot of criticism again, but it is literally scripture. And every parable in all of these different books has probably about 50 different meanings. Not just the surface meaning of the world was created in 7 days, or the parable of talents isn't really talking about blocks of gold and investment. We can find deeper meanings in all of the different scriptures. Once you start to understand and see deeper and see wider, once your consciousness expands, everything looks different, everything becomes scripture. So you can't even go to the cinema and watch a film without realising that Avatar is about how we create reality through powerful meditation, through powerful visualisation, through with five-dimensional visioning. When you look at it, when you start to look at the film, you start to see the true meaning of it below the surface of an action thriller about a guy, that's trying to infiltrate a native world and take over it. You look at something like Legoland, a children's movie, and you see scripture. You see 6,000-year-old texts in a children's film about fucking Lego. It's about how you create your world, how you recreate your world, how you build it, how you maintain it, how you dissolve it and rebuild it from the same blocks using imagination, connecting to divinity, by breaking down and challenging old scripts, by challenging the social mores, by challenging your conditioning. It's a film about fucking Lego blocks, but it's one of the greatest metaphysical films ever written. Everything is scripture. You look at something like, a great film like Ratatouille. Ratatouille is about rats in a cellar, and one of them wants to become a chef. But it's actually a great film about how any talent can be learned by anybody if they have the purpose, but the great stuff is always going to be intuited. And again, it's a film you need to watch. I'm not going to describe it here, but it's scripture. Everything is scripture. Criticism becomes scripture, because when people criticize you, if it hurts you, it's showing you where you've got a leak. It's showing where you've got an aberration. It's showing you where you've got egoic possession. So criticism is scripture. You know, if people overpraise you and you're too high on all that, it's scripture. It's telling you where you've got leaks. It's telling you where the ego is looking to be fed all the time. Everything becomes scripture. So, you know, I remember someone saying to me before, you won't, you know, my God doesn't speak to me through the stars, you know, in the Sunday papers, but my God does. He speaks to me through everything. He speaks to me through, you know, I can look at 2 snails in the garden. I can look at 2 ants around a sugar cube in the garden and see scripture. Because I look at that and I realise that because of the optical nature of their eyes, they will not be aware that I'm there. But that doesn't mean I'm not there. That's scripture. That's showing me the microcosm and the macrocosm. That's saying just because I'm stood here in this body, in this house, talking to this camera, and I can't physically see anything bigger than me or any other beings bigger than me, that doesn't mean they're not there. Any more than, you know, these ants around a sugar cube, you know, might be stood there talking and saying, listen, if there was anything else there, I would know about it. I would see it. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. When we start to expand, we start to see that everything, there is scripture in everything. There is scripture in everybody. There is scripture just in the fact that everything I need to know about the universe can be taught to me through my own body and through my own mind. And everything that can be taught to me about my own mind and my own body can be taught to me by looking out at the universe. This is something Hermes Trismegistus said, that as within, as without, the microcosm and the macrocosm are the same, they reflect each other. So if I really want to learn about something, if I really want to understand something, the learning's already there. I just have to clear away the layers and the fog and the conditioning and the scripts in order to get it. It's already there. Everything we want is already there. The scripture for everything is already there. It's already written. It's written everywhere. It's written into the DNA of everything. The DNA and, you know, the makeup of this camera that we're looking at now, you know, the particles that it's made of I'm made from exactly the same stuff. I'm looking at this house I'm in now. I'm looking at my apartment in London. I'm looking at the car I drive. I'm looking at the hotel that I go and sit in. I recognise that it's all there. It's always been there, but I'm creating it. I'm creating it so I can create it more. I can create it. I can maintain it. I can dissolve it. So the scripture's everywhere. If I ask for a sign, if I connect to the Akashic records, if I connect to my higher self and ask for a sign, I will be given a sign, or I'll be given scripture. In the next article I read, or in the next news bulletin that I look at, or in the next conversation I have, or I'll be walking, you know, through Kumabi and I'll see something that will give me a sign. Everything is scripture. I once stood in front of an oak tree, and the ancients believed the oak tree was a tree of doors, and we could access different realities through it. So I stood in front of this oak tree when I was going through a difficult period, and I asked the oak tree to help me through this suffering. I was going through a lot of suffering, and the word elephant appeared in my mind. Elephant. Look out for the elephant. It literally spoke like that. It made no sense to me at all. No sense. I come home. I've got an email from somebody saying, "Dear Geoff, I read your book on fear many years ago and it saved my life. And it really helped me through a difficult time. And I just wanted to say thank you and recommend that you read this other book about a guy called Shackleton." And this guy sent me an email, and he used the word elephant about a dozen times in the email, because he was talking about how Shackleton and his crew, Shackleton was an explorer, and he did a great book called Endurance about this exhibition they went on where they got stuck in the North Pole, and they were rescued because they managed to get to a place called Elephant Island, and they stayed on Elephant Island for 18 months. But they were stood in front of extreme suffering for 18 months, and all they could do for that period of time was endure. And they endured by keeping discipline, by keeping morale. And at one stage, 3 of them walked off and did this epic march to find help. I think it's a march they did that's never been equaled. The book is called Endurance. But I spoke to this tree, and this tree gave me scripture. And I followed the scripture, I read the book, and I got massive balm, because the book was saying to me, Geoff, you are in the middle of suffering, and you're suffering because you're growing. You're suffering because you're standing in front of parts of you that aren't real, and you're dissolving them. At this point, all you can do is endure, is accept, is surrender to the suffering. Just accept it. The moment you accept it, it will no longer be suffering. And that's what I did. I got great relief from reading this book. That's because I saw scripture in an oak tree. You might look at me and say, he's hugging a tree, he's socks and sandals, he's a Bible basher. But actually, I accessed scripture through a tree. So everything becomes scripture. Everybody becomes scripture. There's a great saying that whoever reads the Bible writes the Bible. Whoever reads the Quran writes the Quran. Whoever reads the Gita writes the Gita. It's basically saying that when we need to learn something, we'll find it. We will write it ourselves and pick up a book as though somebody else has written it. We will give ourselves an experience as though it's just happened spontaneously. We will create what we need to create in order to learn what we need to learn. Everything is scripture. It's very, very exciting time. But we have to recognize it. We have to see it. We have to stop seeing the mundane. I think Einstein said either nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. We have to see that everything is a miracle. We have to see that we're creating this miracle ourselves every single day. And there's no need for us to be afraid, because we are the source of the miracle. The miracle comes to us. And this is very pragmatic. This is very muscular. This isn't sickly sweet theology. This is actually pragmatic, muscular, stand in front of your demons philosophy that works. And I know it works because I have the proof. And I am surrounded by amazing people who have got the proof every single day. Every single day I'm meeting people who are creating the most amazing realities, because they see that everything is scripture. But if you're too busy judging things, if you're too busy pointing at things, if you're too busy criticizing things, if you're too busy being angry at the world, too busy being jealous, too busy being ungrateful for what you're being given every single day, if you're too busy looking at what's wrong, you won't see what's right. You won't see that the scripture is there. Read the emails you send out. Read them back to yourself. Somebody sent us an email once full of self-pity, and Sharon read it and highlighted several parts. I won't say the guy's name, but she said, let's say his name's Pete. She said, that part's Pete, that part's not. That part's Pete, that part's not. That's his best game, that's his shadow. That's his best game, that's his shadow. We just need to send it back to him and say, read your own email. The lessons are in there. There's the scripture. Your own email is the scripture. Go on your Facebook page, go on your Twitter page. Look at the shit you're putting out there. There's the scripture. That's the scripture saying this is who you're not. Look at the beautiful stuff you put out there. Look at the praise you put out there. Look at the accolades you put out there. Look at the love you put out there. That's the scripture. That's saying this is who you are. This is who you can be all the time. We choose what we plant in the substratum. We choose what we pluck out. So the mind, or the great mind, or the universe, or God is like this huge fertile substratum, like a big computer backboard, or like an infinite field of fertile ground. What we plant in it is what we get. It's not God's fault, it's not anybody else's fault. What we plant in it is what we get out of it. If we don't like what's there, pluck it out and plant something better. Don't plant fucking deadly nightshade in the substratum and complain when it's not apples. Everything is scripture. And it's just fucking, it's so exciting. It's such a great time to be alive and to be realizing that whatever we want to do, we can do. But looking at some of the previous podcasts, we've got to be prepared to stand in front of our suffering. We've got to be prepared to confront the things we're afraid of. We've got to be prepared to do the work. We've got to be prepared to surrender. We've got to be prepared to put everything we can into it. It's like me doing this now. I'm doing these podcasts today, and I have to set time out and I have to sit and talk, and it's uncomfortable because half the time I don't know what I'm going to say. I just have to wait for it to come through, and it's going to pick up on my flavours and all the rest of it, but I've still got to make the effort. I've still got to set the camera up. I've still got to buy the camera. I've still got to take the film. I've got to send the film off to my son. My son's got to edit it. It's got to go online. I've got to risk people liking it, disliking it, the criticism. I've got to risk being wrong. You know, I've got to do the work. I've got to actually spend money to buy the camera. I've got to put it out into the world free, trusting that the people that need to see this will see it and they will love it. And other people are going to look at it and just go, oh, fucking hell, you know, what's the catch? What is this? What is the catch? Well, how come it's out there free? What's he looking for? And there'll be people out there that are not grateful for it. There'll be people that are looking for faults. Because even when you give them a gift, they want to attack you. Geoff said that. He said the first time you serve somebody, they bow profusively, they love you. The second time you give them something, they just off that and say, oh, thank you, I really appreciate it. The third time you give them something, they say nothing at all. The fourth time you give them something, they criticise you. The fifth time you give them something, they attack you. That's the nature of people. But that's okay. I'm okay with that as well, because I'm going to put this out there with no expectations. I'm going to put it out there knowing that some kid's going to watch it at 4 in the morning and go, fucking hell, that's me. I'm going to change my life because I can. How delicious.